It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Today we're going to jump on the Sharp Interactive board. Konica Minolta published their second quarter numbers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're halfway through FY 2022. And as I look at Konica's numbers and the other OEMs' numbers, there's one thing that's absolutely sure, okay? We are definitely in some challenging times. There is some shining light over there at Konica Minolta. They actually posted a profit for the second quarter. I'll share that with you in a second. We'll see how that profit impacted the losses they had in the first quarter. But folks, at the end of the day, we got some issues in our industry. And we all know that our industry has some issues. Unfortunately, there's too many players in the space that don't want to face these challenges head on and discuss them. And if we don't discuss what challenges us, guess what? Well, we'll fall victim to all those challenges. We got to be able to discuss it. We got to be able to work together as an industry to get through that rocky road with all its obstacles on our journey toward continuous relevance. When I think about Konica Minolta, and you know, folks, they've had 4 years of struggle. 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. They just finished the second quarter of 22, showing some signs of improvement. That's fantastic. I applaud them for that. And we wish them well these next 6 months, the rest of FY 2022. But ladies and gentlemen, you know, a lot of times when an organization is struggling, and those struggles start to become apparent in the financials, those struggles were started a long time ago. Though it takes these big corporations sometimes, you know, a couple of years to really get impacts of maybe some bad decisions or some overcost or things that just weren't properly taken care of, if you will, and they fester. And sooner or later, they come to the surface. And I truly believe that's what's happened over at Konica Minolta. And it's one of the reasons that I've been so adamant over these last few years with all the OEMs and not just Konica to share more details of your financial situation. Share more details of your IT services, of the cost around IT services, of the DX and the DW strategies. You know, last week I talked regarding Xerox, and you know, the same thing with Xerox. Share more of the information around these other services because it's really where we're all going. If we all agree that the print business is declining, and you'd have to be a total idiot not to understand that the print business is declining. So besides the few idiots that might be out there, if we all agree that the print industry is declining, then we also must agree that we have to offset those declines with additional revenues and profits from other services. We're all on a mission to transition our businesses so that we can deliver those alternative products and services, right? That's the mission. And I think the OEMs have great lessons for all of the dealers. They have great lessons for the entire industry. You know, I'm thinking back like in the 90s. You know, the OEMs, I think, were a whole lot more forthright with their information. And maybe it's because back then we sold printers, supplied them and serviced them, and that was pretty simplistic. Today it's a little more complicated. But it just seems to me that everybody's out there on their own. And they're, you know, they kind of make stuff up as you go along with it when you talk to each other, and we're not really forthright on those challenges that are facing us. And we need to be more forthright as an industry so we can address these challenges. We need to go back in time and remember the times in the 80s and the 90s when that camaraderie was all about improvement. Even if those conversations were tough, they didn't run from them. When I look at our industry today, it's almost comical, and I do provide some comedy around it. When I see grown people showing an award they won and they don't even know how they won it. When I see the collection of groups getting together where they all want to be friendly and talk about absolutely nothing. And ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to improve if we continue to do that. I'm going to continue to do what I do, and I know there's a lot of people that wish that Ray would just go away. Well, guess what? I'm not going away. Because the bottom line is, the industry out there, those media folks, the analysts out there, they're not digging into anything. And if we don't dig into this stuff, how in the world are we ever going to improve? And maybe sometimes I can be a little aggressive in my approach. That's just the way I do it. Get over it. But folks, the whole mission that I have, as the end of the day with Ray, is to drive conversations for improvement. If you don't like the way I deliver that message, well, I can't help that. Don't watch. But you know what, folks? We can all contribute to the health of this industry if we're willing to talk about what's causing its illness. We can all help with the health of this industry if we're willing to talk about its illness, and we need to be able to talk about it. We need to be able to be upfront about it. We got to quit hiding behind all this nonsense. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump on the Sharp Interactive board. We're going to go through the Konica Minolta second quarter. I want to share some thoughts about Konica Minolta in general. These thoughts are the same kind of thoughts I shared when I talked about Xerox and all the rest of the folks. We got some issues, and I want to try to uncover some of these issues. So let's jump on the board. The first thing I want to do is I want to go back in time to 2018. You know, ladies and gentlemen, in 2018, Konica Minolta had a really, really good year. Let me just share that with you. Let's just talk about the operating profit, okay? Let's just cut to the chase. In 2018, Konica Minolta's all-company operating profit was $422.2 million. If you look at the group that we all care about, office and professional print, in the office space, they had a $318.2 million operating profit. Folks, we're 7-8%, okay? Over here in the professional print, they had $93 million. Okay, they did $411 million of operating profit in those two groups combined in 2018. The whole entire company only did 422.2. They were a huge part of it, right? They delivered. And since 2018, they've kind of went through some tough times. It's just apparent, right? But when did those tough times start? I believe those tough times started through a bunch of acquisitions. In 2012, they bought a company called All Covered. You know, they were going to go out into the marketplace, the greatest aspirations in the world, and they were spot on for doing it. I'll never, say, hey, you should have never bought All Covered. Because the industry was transitioning. They were up front of that. They were ahead of that. Since they bought All Covered, they bought 17 companies, I believe it is, that put underneath that All Covered umbrella. Some of those are definitely questionable. I've had episodes on that. But at the end of the day, folks, what was the issue? What was the underlying issue? In North America, they bought a whole bunch of assets to help them transition to deliver alternative products besides print into the marketplace. And for that 10, 12-year period of time, what happened? And when did the cost problems start to really start having impact? When were maybe some of these bad decisions starting to get impacted? Well, if you look at the financials, it's 2019. And keep in mind, FY 2019 ended in March of 2020. The pandemic really didn't take off until March of 2020. So it could have affected FY 2019 last month a little bit. But ladies and gentlemen, 2019 was the start. Let me share my thoughts. In 2018, $422.2 million operating profit, and Konica was excited about that, and they're talking about 2019, and they had some high projections for 2019, okay? Look what happened. 2019 ended up with an operating profit of $55.4 million. Well off those aspirations. If we go further in, we look at 2020 and 2021. In 2020, operating profit loss of $110.3 million. 2021, operating profit loss of $151.6 million. So going into FY 2022, they had some baggage. They had some struggles. But we're in the fourth year, ladies and gentlemen, of these struggles. We're in the fourth year. And so where's the turning point? Well, I'm happy to say the turning point could actually be the second quarter. Because in the second quarter, they produced an operating profit. Albeit, it's an extremely low percentage of the top line revenue for the company. But it is green. It's on the Sharp Interactive board green. And it's exciting for me to be able to say that. And I'm hoping I can see more green as we go forward. But the top line revenue for the second quarter was $1.9 billion. Operating profit of $41.1 million. Let's look at the place that we all call home for the second quarter. At digital workflow and professional print. Digital workflow top line revenue was $1.016 billion. Professional print was $440 million. $440.5 million, folks. Operating profit in those two groups. Digital workplace, operating profit of $28.5 million. And operating profit in professional print of $27.8 million. Folks, green on the board is good. Let's look where they're at for the 6 months, because these operating profits definitely pushed into that $80 million first quarter loss as a company. But let's look at where we're at. Digital workforce, right now, they're sitting on $23.1 million operating loss for 6 months in. Professional print is sitting on $34 million positive operating profit. The professional print group for FY 2022 is putting some profit to the bottom line. First quarter, they put $6 million, excuse me. This quarter, they put $34 million. So I'd be really interested to know how they're doing that. That's a competitive space out there. How are they doing that? We're seeing some supply issues now with the label, with the label paper, and how is that going to affect the industry? That's interesting to me. But folks, bottom line, 6 months in, we got a long way to go. They have their projections. They're thinking about the future. Let me share those projections with you. So Konica Minolta, they added some revenue numbers to both digital workplace and professional print to finish out the year. Let me share that with you. So they added $653.2 million to the digital workplace number. They added $54.4 million to professional print. They want to end the year with a total revenue in digital workplace of $4.2 billion, and they want to end the total year with professional print with $1.5 billion. Their aspirations for operating profit, digital workplace is $54.4 million, and for professional print is $71.4 million. And they got these aspirations. What do they need to accomplish that? We got 6 months left. They need $37.4 million in operating profit over the next 6 months in the professional print space to hit the number. They're hitting the number in professional print. They've hit it all year so far. Can they continue to do it? I think they're pretty close. They need $77.5 million in the digital workplace. This is the one I'm struggling with a little bit. You put 28, where's that number? I think you put $28 million worth of operating profit in the second quarter, but can you do that for the third and the fourth? That's a big number, $77.5 million to end up the year to get where you need to be. As a company, they want to do $7.6 billion top line revenue. They want a 1.3% operating profit, which give them $102 million. In order for them to reach $102 million operating profit for FY 2022, that would be a $253.6 million improvement over 2021. That's a big number. I'm not saying they can't do it, but there's a lot of things that have to happen to get to these numbers. We know right now that we can't sell our way out of problems. I think the whole world, our whole industry, the whole world probably for that matter, but our industry realizes that. At this point, we really can't outsell the problems. What we have to do is rein in the cost. Konica Minolta has been reining in some cost. They've been talking about that publicly for the last year or so, and we'll see how that affects them going into this next 6 months. But folks, it's not just Konica. I've talked about this a lot. It's all the players in the space. The cost reining in has really got to happen. We have really got to rein in some costs. And we're going to see more and more tightening of the belts, if you will. But folks, I put this slide together, and I found this information in their presentation. And again, I urge all of you, please go to these OEMs, investor relations section, and look at these presentations. And get together with your comrades and talk about this stuff. Get together with your leaders of the OEMs and ask them questions around this. How are we going to learn if we don't explore? So I found this over here, and it was a great little chart, and it says the composition of revenue by region. And so when you look on this chart, composition of revenue by region, I go over to North America, we represent 34% of the revenue in quarter two. And so I wanted to look at that and see what are we doing here in North America. And no matter what part of the world you're in, if you go to the website and presentation, you could do the same exercise yourself. And I think it's important to know, what is your OEM doing where you are? Because it could be a whole lot different than what they're doing in America, what they're doing in Europe, or what they're doing in the ANZ. So it's important to know these things. And I strongly urge these peer groups to start getting involved with this and really understanding and exploring this. So let's look at this. This chart is very interesting. We got 34% revenue coming. So then I wanted to look, and let's see what the North America revenue is for office and what we call DWDX. And they have a chart over here. It says digital workplace, and they have the revenue numbers color-coded, and here's what they're based on. The light blue is for office, the dark blue is for DWDX and managed IT, and then the gold is the operating profit. I wanted to focus on the revenue numbers for office, DWDX, managed IT, and then extrapolate out the 34% and see what we're doing here in North America. So, if you look at the dark blue, it was 24.9 billion yen for the second quarter in the DWDX managed IT space. So that translates to 169.2 million in US dollars. 34% of that is 57.5 million for the quarter. If you do a run rate on that, it comes out to 230 million a year. So 230 million a year in North America in DWDX and managed IT. And for a while, I've been challenging Konica and the rest of them, what's your IT services revenue? What's the number coming out of IT services and all covered, all those assets? Folks, I'm thinking right now, if you take out the DWDX, which really isn't really clearly defined what exactly products those are, but when I think about IT services and cybersecurity services and that all covered deliverable, I'm thinking that's probably about a $100 million company. I'm thinking that's about a $100 million company. I know that they're going to take all covered to other parts of the world, and so that revenue could be gobbled up in some of these other percentages, but at this point in time, where we're at today in 2022, I don't think that's got a lot of momentum in other parts of the world. So that number is probably mostly North America, and all covered would be in that number. If you look at the office group, it generated 124.6 billion yen, which translates to 846 million for the world for office. 287.6 million for the quarter would be the 34% for the United States or North America, right? That's 1,170 million. So 1,170 million coming out of the office for North America. Like I said, I strongly suggest you all do this for your parts of the world. So then I wanted to take the projections. So we got these 2022 projections. Look at those and then see what the contribution would be for North America. So they want to do 4.2 billion in the digital workplace. Well, our 34% would be 1.4 billion in North America. They want to do 1.5 billion in professional print in North America. Our 34% would be 525 million. We're like a 1.9 billion business for Konica North America in the print space. 1.9 billion. So it's a pretty big number. And it's just kind of interesting. There is some questions that this breakdown makes me ask. So I'm going to ask some questions. So let's jump to my next slide. And folks, these are questions I've been asking of Konica for a while. I've asked them of all the players in the space. When I talked about Xerox last week, I mean, these questions the financial analysts are going to start demanding answers to. It's just a matter of time. As the industry continues to transition more into broader deliverables outside of print, when the whole world realizes that print has fallen off a cliff, and wait till HP publishes their year-end financials, and I think the whole world's going to get an awakening. But the financial analysts are going to start asking, what else are you doing? And that what else, how profitable is that? That what else, what are the costs associated with that? That what else, how are you going to scale that? That's what they're going to want to know. And I just think we as an industry need to start talking about that stuff right now. Here's my questions for Konica Minolta. And by the way, these questions apply to everybody. What's the revenue growth percentage for direct and dealer? What are the dealers growing? What are the direct operations growing? Supply chain issues have been affecting all the OEMs. That's an interesting percentage to me. It'd be interesting to see how that pans out. What is the profit percentage contributed to the dealer business? So for years, we've known that the dealers were more profitable. Has that profit taken a hit because of the supply chains, things you got to do, shipping, there's all kinds of things involved now with getting equipment out to the dealers. Has that changed for the OEMs? Is that impacting some of your gross profits, some of your profits? Did you see gains in dealer inventories, and how will that affect the second half? And this is an important question. We saw that Konica Minolta put an operating profit for that second quarter. That's fantastic. But it was a low percentage of operating profit. And one of my concerns is if the dealers are out there, as the OEMs start to get inventory and some of these supply chain issues get resolved, we're going to have dealers buying up inventory. But that's not putting it out in the marketplace. That's putting it in a dealer's warehouse. And the stuff that goes in these dealers' warehouses, well, they might be delivering that the second half of the year, but they're not buying it from you. And that could impact all the OEMs going forward. So it'd be interesting to know, how have the dealer inventory levels changed since COVID? Because there's some dealers out there that got some pretty deep pockets, and I think they could be filling up some warehouses. And if they're buying these millions of dollars worth of product from you today, that means they're probably not going to buy them from you tomorrow. You can only put so much in the market, supply and demand, right? What's the revenue and cost numbers for just IT, all covered, and its categories? I've been asking that every time I do an episode. I'll continue to do that. Maybe one day we could sit down and talk through that. But folks, it'd be nice to know what these are. What are the IT services revenues and profits? The human capital cost to deliver IT and cybersecurity is growing like crazy. And those costs are going to impact what? Profitability. What exactly is the breakdown of revenue and profits for DX and DW, and what is the product portfolio? It would be really nice to understand exactly what these things are. DW, DX, and not just from Konica, from all the players in the marketplace. When you start talking about DX, everybody, DX, it sounds great, but how do I make money off DX? What's the actual product, and what's the revenue, and what's the profit? What are the costs for both DX and DW? And that would help, share some of the light on what you're delivering as true IT services, if you will, because some of that could be combined with each other. What specifically is eating profit in the print groups? Supply chain costs, sales, service, human capital cost, equipment, IT as example. So we know we got supply chain, we got equipment going up in price, parts are going up in price, but the human capital piece is important, and we can cut and cut and cut if we're cutting out maybe print personnel because we're consolidating our print businesses, if you will. When we start adding replacement human capital to help us into these other transitional products, those people tend to cost more money. The infrastructure to deliver these alternative solutions generally costs more money. Now, you can scale that infrastructure, but to get into it costs a lot of money. And how are these costs impacting the OEM's bottom lines? And, this question came in from the audience, and they said the Production Expo in Vegas, Konica Minolta did not present at the Production Expo in Las Vegas. And folks, here's what I say about that. I think OEMs choose where they want to go. Okay, that's just the reality of life. Just like my dealer friends who choose where they go. Look, maybe there's a reason to go to that production show. And if you're an OEM and you could justify that reason and the expense to go to it. Maybe Konica didn't think there was any value in that or an ROI in that. That could possibly be, folks. That's not a critique. That's just the reality. Konica Minolta was at the Label Expo in Chicago. Maybe they didn't see a real ROI on the one in Vegas. And going forward, folks, this is for all the OEMs, We can't just show up at places because we want to hang around with our friends and talk about how great we all feel. We got to show up to places that actually have a payout, okay? We got to show up to places that are going to benefit us, Next week, by the way, I'll be at IT Nation. I can't wait to go to that. I can't wait to spend 3-4 days with IT service providers to learn about that marketplace, to really get my head into what those people are doing out in the marketplace. And I urge all of my friends in the Document Image channel, you're going to have to evaluate, just as Konica decided not to go to this production meeting, but you're going to have to make your own evaluations on where you go in the marketplace. Our industry right now, through its decline, there's a lot of groups out there trying to corral people into complacency is the way I believe it. And at the end of the day, we need to corral people that'll get together, that'll challenge one another, that'll challenge the OEMs, so we can all seek to improve as we travel down that rocky road toward continuous relevance. Folks, I'm going to end with this last slide. And it's something we all need to pay attention to here in North America and across the world. Macroeconomics is killing us. And the bottom line is, we haven't seen the Fed at this rate in 15 years. That's going to impact lease rates. That's going to impact your customers' credit lines. That's going to impact this entire damn industry. That's going to impact dealers and their credit lines. This is going to be extremely impactful. And we have to be able to realize that. And we have to understand something. And I want to repeat it again because I really liked it when he said it. Orlando Bravo. We cannot chase revenue at all costs. And we have to focus on profitability. We're not going to be able to sustain ourselves as an industry. OEMs are not going to be able to sustain themselves as an ongoing concern with 1% and 2% operating profits. Those numbers have to improve. And the only way we're going to improve it is to focus on profit. Because everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I'll see you all tomorrow.